Hi everybody, welcome to Table Talk. My name is Gabriel. Table Talk is a series of videos where we attempt to talk about really current issues in a gospel-centered way. And today the question we'll be answering is, what does sex have to do with God? And to talk about this issue, we've got Denesh. Denesh is the head pastor at the Crossing Church here in Singapore. And let's just get started.
Sure.
So Denesh, when we talk about sex, God is not exactly the first person that comes into our mind, right? When we talk about sex and God, in fact, the view of God is that he's pretty anti-sex, right?
Right.
And in Christian circles, there's a lot of rules and regulations around sex. So I guess the question is God against sexual activity?
Gabriel, that you're right. That's the way the world perceives God and sex. So I guess if you play a word association game, if you throw out the word sex, people are not going to shout God as the word is associated. I mean, it sounds absurd, but actually, the odd thing is the reality is quite different. That God and sex really go together. And let me try and explain why. They go together because sex is actually God's idea. Sex is actually God's idea. So when God made this whole world, when He made us, God actually made humanity, and He made man and woman and marriage, and He gave them the great gift of sex. Let me just try and unpack what that means. So for example, when God made this entire world in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, He makes this world, and then He makes plants and animals and fishes and birds, and then He makes the first man, Adam. When He makes the first man, Adam, He's looking for a helper who's suitable for Adam so that they can rule this world together. And God looks around and He doesn't find a suitable helper. And what He does is He fashions a woman, the first woman, Eve, out from Adam himself. And it's an amazing account, Genesis 2, when Adam looks at Eve for the first time. He does, I guess, what most men do when they see a beautiful woman. He breaks out into poetry. Let me read you what Adam says. This is in Genesis 2. Adam says this, "This is at last bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man." I mean, he sees her and he understands her as complementary to him. He admires her and he names her woman. Because you can see how she's like him, but she's still slightly different from him. She's complementary to him. So the account goes on, and Adam and Eve, they are naked, they are not ashamed, they are joined together in a marriage union, and the Bible says that they are joined together in a one flesh, sexually intimate union with one another. So sex is really God's idea, even right from the beginning. In creation. Let me just say one more thing which might be quite interesting to people listening in and not very familiar with the Bible. There's another book of the Bible called 1 Corinthians, and in chapter 7, the Apostle Paul, he's trying to show us how pro-sex, if you like, God is, and he gives advice to married couples, husbands and wives. And what he says to them is, husbands, when you're married, your body doesn't just belong to yourself anymore, it now belongs to your wife. And similarly, for wives, when you're now married, I mean, your body doesn't belong to you, it belongs to your husband. And so what you need to do when you're a married couple, man and wife, is you're supposed to be giving yourself to one another as you serve each other sexually. And in fact, Paul goes on to say something which I guess is kind of funny if you think about it in some senses. He says, look, you're meant to enjoy sex so much with each other as husband and wife in a marriage that the only time you're meant to stop is to stop to pray. So he's saying, keep going and just stop to pray. He tells us two things. Number one, sex is God's idea. It's a good thing from God's perspective for a marriage relationship between a man and woman. And the second thing is that prayer is a good thing to God too. But I guess we're here to talk about sex and not prayer. Maybe prayer we'll talk about another time.
Yeah. So let's keep on topic.
Okay.
So clearly there's a lot of positive portrayals of sex in the Bible, which you've been referencing. But I mean, the Bible is a book that's 2,000 years old, right?
That's right.
So how can it have anything relevant to say about sex, especially for people in Singapore living in the 21st century and around the world? I mean, why should we look to the Bible to hear about sex?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. A lot of my friends, a lot of people that I meet as a pastor, often say to me the Bible's archaic, it's got no relevance for life today. And often when they say that, It's because maybe they've been in churches where the Bible is treated like an irrelevance. It's never really been taught well to them, so they think it's got nothing to say to them today. Or they've dipped into the Bible, but the way they've treated the Bible is kind of like a cookbook. Where with a cookbook, you kind of just flip here and you flip there, and you're kind of looking for this magic verse to say something to you. But that's not the way we're meant to read the Bible. We're meant to read the Bible really like the way we read any other book. You read it chapter by chapter, book by book. And I tell you, I've been a Christian now for a number of years, and as I read the Bible, the thing that amazes me is how contemporary it is. It just speaks to everyday life. In the Bible, it gives me great advice about, work and money and sex and how to relate to each other. It just lays out all those things for me. And again, I find the interesting thing is as I read the Bible, I'm often finding that God is speaking to me into my specific situation and circumstance. So God speaks to me through the Bible. Now, let me get back to whether the Bible's got anything relevant to say about sex. Let me start with an illustration. A friend of mine, a really good friend, recently gave me a Kindle. What's a Kindle? This thing from Amazon is an e-book reader. And I've never had a Kindle in my life, right? I didn't even know where the on button was, so I was kind of looking around and couldn't find it. And the thing you do when you get a new product like that is you try and figure out what's the maker's instructions. So you kind of look online and you find a manual, and it tells you how to operate the Kindle. And you do that with everything. A new computer, a new car, read the maker's instructions. It tells you how best to use the product in your hands. And the Bible, if you like, is like the maker, God's instruction manual for life. It'll lay out for us the best way to live life, the best way to view work and money and relationships and sex. And so we really need to approach the Bible from that perspective. And the interesting thing is, I think the Bible says lots of things about sex and marriage, but it tells us, maybe I'll just mention two things at this point. One is that sex is only for the context of a marriage between a man and a woman. I'll tell you why that is. I mean, sex is a very vulnerable thing, actually. When you're having sex with someone, you're standing in front of them, you're naked. You got to trust them completely. You're going to serve them, and they're going to serve you. And when you want to do something like that with someone, I mean, you want to do that with someone who you have a relationship of trust and love and service with. And that's only in the context of a marriage. It's not something to be taken lightly or flippantly in any way. But there's another thing. I mean, the Bible tells us actually that sex and marriage points beyond itself to actually the ultimate marriage between Jesus Christ and His church, the bride. See, the Bible has lots of pictures to talk about God's relationship with us. So one of them is that God's a father and we're His children. Another one is that God is a shepherd and we're His sheep. Another one that recurs again and again in the Bible is that God is like this husband, He's like a bridegroom, and we, His people, are like His bride. But the picture in the Bible is of God as this bridegroom who's ever faithful as a husband. He's always sacrificial, always serving, always loving. But at the same time, as His bride, we're very different. We're always eager to jump into bed with another god or another idol. We're always running away from God. We're adulterous. And as the Bible proceeds, that picture is painted again and again and again. But it finds its resolution in Jesus. Jesus comes as the ultimate bridegroom. And what He does is, as He dies on the cross, He washes His bride absolutely clean and spotless and righteous. And the Bible ends actually with a great marriage. The marriage between Jesus, the bridegroom, and His church, the bride. And that's a marvelous picture. So if you think about how human marriages and sex are an earthly picture of that ultimate spiritual, eternal reality, well, then it doesn't make sense for us to kind of mess up that earthly picture now, because that would just be misrepresenting what the ultimate reality is.
Okay, so thanks for that, and thanks for telling us, what the purpose of marriage is and all that. I've got a question on pre-marital sex.
Sure.
I mean, is it really wrong? I mean, if you think about it, if it's between two consenting adults who are committed to each other,
Yeah.
What's wrong with premarital sex?
Yeah. Look, I'll come straight out and say it's wrong. All sex outside of a man-woman marriage is wrong. Premarital sex is wrong. extramarital sex is wrong, pornography is wrong. It's all wrong. And I know what the reaction is going to be. I say this to people all the time, and then they'll say to me, man, God's a killjoy. He's just there to ruin our lives and make sure we don't have fun. If I want to do whatever makes me happy, why can't I do it? And my comeback to that would be to say, does it really make you happy? I mean, you think about it, premarital sex. You look at all the young people around today, maybe they're engaged in premarital sex, and you ask yourself, does it really make them happy? Or actually, in my experiences, I meet young people who've had premarital sex. I mean, they have, huge issues to do with self-identity and self-worth and their self-image. They've lacked confidence because of, what's gone on in premarital sexual relationships that they've had in the past. You think about young women who've had premarital sexual relationships, and you ask yourself, are they actually more fulfilled, or are they actually feeling quite used? Are they really, really happy? Maybe you look at extramarital relationships and you think, maybe the husband cheats on the wife and he does it because it makes him feel happy. Or the wife cheats on the husband and she does it because it makes her feel happy. And you ask yourself, well, are they really happy? Because what that does is it basically destroys that one flesh union. Imagine a marriage is kind of like if you have two sheets of paper and you glue them together. That's what God has done. He's made us one flesh. He's made us one entity out of two. And when you try and destroy that, it's like tearing those two pieces of paper apart, and that's going to be collateral damage. What happens is, let's say the husband cheats on the wife, and he'll have to live with guilt for the rest of his life. The partner that he sleeps with, I mean, she's got to think to herself, is this guy going to cheat on me like he's done with his first partner to begin with? And the wife that's left behind, she's distraught, she's questioning herself, whatever she's done, maybe she's caused this in some way, maybe she slips into depression. And the children, what happens to the children? They're just emotionally damaged from all that goes on. So I'm not convinced it actually leads to happiness in the end. I think what we need to see is that at the end of the day, God is out to protect us. He's not actually out to be a killjoy. And in the book of the Bible, there's a book called Song of Songs. It's an interesting read if people have never read it before. It's all about the sexual relationship, really, between a man and a woman, and celebrates a sexual union between a husband and a wife. And in the book of Song of Songs, there's a refrain. It happens 3 times. And let me read it for you. It says this: do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. It's like a warning, a loving warning, trying to tell us, look, love is a very powerful thing, sexual love. So don't mess around with it. Don't play with it. Keep it for its right time, which is a marriage between a man and a woman. In fact, at the end of the book of Song of Songs, there's a poetry on love, and this is what it says: love is as strong as death. Jealousy is fierce as the grave. Its flashes are the flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised. I mean, the power of love there is just amazing, strong as death, fierce as the grave. It's like the flame of the Lord himself. Waters cannot quench it. Money cannot buy you love. I mean, all those things are trying to tell you, don't mess around with sexual love. It'll win in the end. It'll destroy you. Keep it for the right time and the right context.
Thanks for that. And I think you've shown some real concrete examples why sex outside of marriage is a bad idea.
Okay.
But how about pornography? I mean, if you think about it, it's nobody's getting hurt, right? Like
right.
If it's between you and the computer screen. So what is wrong with pornography?
Well, quite a lot of things, and I'll say actually that quite a lot of people will get hurt. To begin with, the person you're watching on porn, you don't know whether that person has been exploited in some way, whether that person has been abused to be able to do whatever that they are now doing on that screen that they are watching. So that entire scene that you're watching, it just, all the background that goes into that actually shows you that maybe the people you're watching have been manipulated. So they're hurt. I think you're hurt as well as a guy watching porn. Why? Because I think it distorts your image of what sex is and what relationships are all about. And it just makes you treat, let's just talk about men, right? It makes men treat and view women in a very degrading way, as if they're objects, just to fulfill their own desires. And I think what it does over time is it makes men more and more selfish. Because it's all about me, me, me. It's all about, I want to get what I want to get whenever I want to get it. So I think it actually hurts yourself if you do it long term. You'll be addicted to it. The third thing is, I think it hurts your eventual spouse if you do get married one day. Because what you've done is you've actually got all these images in your mind about what an ideal sexual partner ought to be like. And it's all not, it's not going to be real. It's a fantasy world that's out there that you're watching on porn. And you try and impose that on your wife of the future, and she's going to be an ordinary girl who's, maybe a homely girl, a decent girl, and she's not going to be able to do all those things or look the way that all those people did that you've seen in the past. And you feel dissatisfied, unfulfilled. Maybe you impose on her things that, aren't normal. And that will, I think, be a friction, and it'll actually cause a lot of confidence issues between her and you, and just how she views herself. So I think it's destructive on many, many different levels.
Okay. Thanks for that, Dinesh.
Okay.
Finally, to end off, so we've spoken about how sex is great. God is actually really pro-sex.
Yes.
And He wants the best for us. So it's best. Well, you should only do sex when in the context of marriage.
Yeah.
But how about singles, right? Sex is such an awesome thing, and it's such a great gift from God.
Mm-hmm.
What about singleness? I mean, is it bad to be single
Mm-hmm.
if sex and marriage is such great gifts from God?
No, it's not. It's not wrong to be single. It's not bad to be single. It's not second class to be a single person. I know, living in the culture that we do, sometimes with parents and relatives and the pressure they put on us, it almost makes you feel second class if you're a single person. I'll just say 3 quick things. In the Bible, actually, all Christians are already married. We're all already married because Jesus is our bridegroom. We are His bride. And so whether you're a single person or a married person on earth, you're already married spiritually, eternally to Jesus Christ. And that you're married to a guy who's the dream bridegroom, and that marriage is going to last forever. So number 1, you're already married. Number 2, actually, the Bible tells us that both states are equal, singleness and marriage. Not one is better than the other is better than the other. No, they're both equal states. And so we really need to teach marriage and singleness as both equal states under God. The last thing is the Bible says, look, don't get hung up about whether you're going to get married or whether you're going to be single. The most important thing, 1 Corinthians 7 says, is to realize that, look, life is short. Judgment Day is coming. There's a far bigger thing to be living for, which is to be singularly focused on Jesus and His kingdom and to live to serve Him. Do that as a single person, do that as a married person. Just don't waste your life, trying to and ah about which state you should be in. So the Bible upholds both marriage and singleness.
Okay. Thanks, Dinesh.